resume the recording. As the lady is telling you, I have resumed the recording, and I'm gonna shift us to our agenda. So we are kicking off a wonderful and exciting agenda today for the Lower St. Croix Steering Committee. I feel like we were all just together on Monday, but that was the decision makers, and now we are the worker bees coming back together again on Wednesday to talk about how we will get this all done. So let me just roll through the agenda and make sure you all agree that this is what we will talk about, and then let me know if you want to add anything. Administrative updates from Craig, a discussion of the funding allocation from the 2022. I think I might even have these numbers wrong. It's more like 2022 through 25. Subcommittee updates. We have 2 projects that we will be looking at for enhanced street sweeping and delineation of prioritized contributing subcatchments to allocate funding for, looking at our cumulative progress update, and then talking about work plan development. Anything else need to be added to this agenda? Anybody?
No, I will be providing updates on the protocol update and the Rock Lake swab, but we don't need to add them specifically to the agenda. Just I need another minute to talk about that stuff.
Okay. All right, then Craig, you wanna take it away with the financial update? Do you want me to? Nope, this is meeting notes.
Hey Joel, if there's anybody here you don't know and they start talking, then it's your job to say, hey, person I don't know, please introduce yourself. And we're just
I'm sorry, go ahead, Joel.
Oh no, I said I can do that, although I can do a little digging myself too.
And maybe just each of you, as you are a person speaking on the agenda, just start by introducing yourself so Joel kind of knows who you are and why you are introducing this. And I could model that behavior by saying, hi, Joel. I'm Angie Hong, and I coordinate the East Metro Water Resource Education Program, which is an education partnership that exists in the area, but also the kind of coordinator for all these committees that are going on for the Lower St. Croix Partnership. And then Craig will do the financial update.
Hi, Joel. Craig Mel, Chisago Sound Water. I'm the fiscal agent. Well, we are the fiscal agent. I'm not the fiscal agent. We as a Chisago Sound. Angie, Emily put this together, which is a great spreadsheet. If you want to scroll down to the Excel document that I have, it's probably a couple pages lower than this one. I'll just quick over. Really at the short of it for everybody, we've encumbered 47% of the current Clean Water Fund, or excuse me, this one, the current WBIF program dollars have been encumbered in 5 of the 8 categories, activities 1, 2, 3, 8, and 10. I anticipate we will be seeing some movement coming soon on some of these other activities with some funding requests. And I know that's pretty much everything I have in the financial side. So if anybody has questions, holler at me. Otherwise, I know a bunch of you sat in on the PC meeting the other night. Emily, feel free to add on to the stuff you have above.
Wait till my item at the end of the agenda to do progress.
Okay.
I'm good unless anybody has questions.
Yep, I was thinking the same thing, that the financial update just got shared on Monday, so I think most of the group was there at that meeting as well. Do we want to have further discussion about the funding allocation for the next biennium right now?
Jamie, do you want to lead that discussion? Was I can just, I mean, we're allocated to get, I think, $14,000 more in the next biennium, which should be approved by Bowser. Well, it probably was approved by Bowser today.
Yeah, I can give just a real quick summary. The next round of WBIF is still around 1.2 million with the Metro and whole watershed pots. It is, yeah, about $20-some thousand more than last time. So it's really similar, but it's FY23 money. So we'll get it around July 1st of 2022 if we've got a work plan in place by then. So we've got a work plan to do, and then that July 1st deadline coming up. And policy committee receives that update, so it'll be on us next to put together a work plan.
Okay, and I put that at the end of the agenda for us to talk about what that will look like. The work plan development, or how we will begin doing that work plan development. Okay, so then, shall I turn it over to Jay for Jay and Joel for an agronomy outreach update?
Absolutely. I think the last time we talked about this, we had talked about extending the deadline for the applications. And so that deadline was extended to the 25th. We now have a slightly larger pile of applications to review. Last time I checked, Barbara was the only one who has completely finished the review of all the applications. So you rock, Barbara. And Joel, you and I suck. And then we have a deadline of Thursday to finish our application review. We're going to be meeting as a subcommittee, interview committee on Friday via hopefully not WebEx. And then, excellent. And then potentially making interview offers relatively soon. Also, the EU and the Washington Conservation District are kind of right in the middle of all the contract negotiations and working through all those wonderful details. And that we have another meeting scheduled when? Joel, that's coming up soon.
I think we still need to set that up.
We need to set that up. Yep. So we're in the middle of that. We got feedback from the Washington County Assistant Attorney. So Susan had some good comments. We just got your attorney comments back. And so we're literally in the middle of all that moving forward though. Joel and I are very optimistic, aren't we, Joel? It's gonna be great. Any other comments, Joel?
No, I think you covered it well.
Thank you.
Okay, then I have down here an update on urban and agricultural projects. And I think we just wanted to get in the habit of sharing back with the group when we have allocated funding for projects to check in and see how they're going and if they're in progress or just completed. So Matt Moore, what can you tell us about your project down in South Washington?
Well, our project was completed back in June. Craig, I just received the final pay request a couple days ago. So I got that over to Melissa and we'll get stuff pulled together and get it sent to you.
Sounds good, Matt. Thanks for the update on that. I appreciate that.
Yep.
I have an update for Matt too, since you're right there. I just signed the check to reimburse you for the design that we cost shared. So probably one of the largest checks I've ever signed.
It's amazing how many checks you've signed coming to us in the last.
Isn't it interesting?
months.
We have been funneling a lot of funding your way. This is the FY19, most of it's well, some of it was 319 funding and some of it was FY19 watershed-based funding, and there was some St. Croix River Association dollars in there as well. So it was a good project.
I told Craig at some point, and I think this group needs to talk about engineering costs during construction.
Mm-hmm.
When we have an engineer do a project, they also provide us with construction engineering and oversight. And I think that should be part of the construction costs. So we got to have that discussion as a group at some point and look at those costs.
Versus having it be as a separate TA cost.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. Paul, do you have an update on the Kinsey project on Rock Lake?
I'm becoming slightly terrified about it, if that makes anyone feel good. Matt said that it was too positive in here, so I'll sour the mood a bit. We are at the hands of this fence contractor who is way overloaded. So we're still waiting on it. I've been trying to put the pressure on them as the weather is starting to get colder. The fence posts need to be in the ground before it freezes. So yeah, I've been becoming an annoyance to Ryan Clark and Mr. Hinsey trying to get an update on that. But as of right now, nothing has happened.
Okay. Cool.
Excuse me,
then-
Angie, one second. Paul, that's not a major issue. If we
I
have to
know.
extend the
I'm like-
contract, if we have to go till 2022, that's fine.
We'll try and get it. We'll try and get it done this fall still, but yeah, if we have to extend it or something, we can cross that road when we get there.
That's not an issue at all.
Yeah, project construction delays aren't that negative, Paul. You're gonna have to do better than that.
I did my best. I'm sorry, Matt.
Ooh.
Okay, I will move us along then, and feel free to stop me if I'm moving too fast, but watershed education, like I said, we did just have the policy committee meeting on Monday, so it feels like a lot of this is a repeat. But I sent out a newsletter last week, Wednesday, with a little deeper information about a number of things, including some of the education projects that are underway. And I'll let Barbara jump into talking more about these, but one of the things that I thought would be good to just invite this group, we're talking about scheduling a workshop for local decision makers in 2022 that would focus on managing development and the tools and strategies you might use for that, conservation development, mid, shoreline, wetland protections. And then also I know that Barbara's been talking with Craig Mill about a workshop series for small farmers. And I thought it was a good opportunity to see who among this group would like to be involved in the planning for either of those activities. And Barbara, if you want to describe in more detail either of those, or if people just want to volunteer and say, yes, I definitely want to be engaged in that, let us know.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much covering it. And so I'm headed up to Chisago next week, and we'll be chatting with Craig and team about what this potential first half day workshop could look like. I know that they're interested in potentially doing a parallel series for larger farmers as well. But I kind of have shipped the idea to Paul and to Tiffany when I've met with them recently. And thus far, everybody seems pretty excited about just being able to start kind of building these contacts and networks. So Craig, is there anything you wanted to add immediately about the farmer-led initiatives?
Oh, that's good, Barbara. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
fine.
I would volunteer the time of the to be hired extension educator. to
Thanks,
help with
Joel.
that.
Great.
And in the meantime, if there are things that we can do, certainly reach out to me if you're looking for connections or folks to talk at either of those.
I've just spent significant portions of my last 2 days with John Bellata doing the trainer game for the watershed game. So it was fun
Good.
working with him again.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you learned that game. Not to put Mike Eisenstein and Jay Riggs on the spot, but do either of you want to be involved at all in planning the workshop for local decision makers?
Yeah, I definitely will be happy to help out with developing the MIDS workshops and outreach engagement efforts.
Okay. All right.
That'd be awesome.
I'm happy to provide some feedback if you want me to be an idea guy.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Then in that case, oh, I see Tiffany. Sounds awesome. We're happy to help with either if more help is needed too. Yes. I think that the main thing that we would love to hear from people is, you know your communities better than Barbara and I do. I mean, I've gotten a good idea of what the personalities are like of the the different cities in Washington County, but I don't really know what the personalities are like of the different cities and townships in the further north communities. One thing that we have experienced in Washington County is that we can always do a better job of getting people to the workshops if it's on a boat. We're out in the St. Croix River and that's why they come. Yes, they're interested in the content, but mostly they want to network and be able to hobnob with other elected officials. And so that's a big draw. And so Barbara and I were talking about how could we find a similar atmosphere, at a location that's maybe a little further north in the watershed. Maybe it's at a local brewery, maybe it's at one of the local vineyards, somewhere that it still has that opportunity for networking and social aspect that they so enjoy.
We want to make it feel special. We want to make them feel special. Yes.
Pleasant Valley Orchard has a beautiful view of the watershed.
Which one's called what? Which one?
Pleasant Valley Orchard, Jim Burkholz's orchard.
Oh, that would be
that would be awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I would maybe note too, with as many communities that we have that would be considering MIDS, we may want to think about doing a couple of them and then having 2 or 3 opportunities identified, just because it's nice to build multiple contacts within a community. And when we think about council members or town supervisors and planning commission members who are all important in that process, it'd be great to get as many of them as possible in the room for that MIDS 101 kind of an introduction piece.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because I know that with the boat workshop in the past, we always kind of had a registration cap of around 100 or 110 that we started having to turn people away after that because there literally wasn't enough room in the boat anymore. So yeah, if we're expanding geographically and we want to have more than just city council members there. Okay, Becky, I don't know if you have any updates from wetlands or if anybody wants to speak up.
I have one more thing I want to bring
Yeah.
up regarding
Yes.
education.
Yes.
There was some conversation at the policy committee on Monday that seemed to have, like, it was pretty clear to me that there was some confusion between what MREP's doing and what Barbara's doing for the Lower St. Croix. And I want to kind of bring that back to this group. If there's some additional communication, sorry, there was a fly. If there's some additional communications that we should be doing to like clarify the different roles and responsibilities of what Angie's doing as part of MREP and what Barbara's doing for Lower St. Croix and MREP, that, you know, give us some feedback so we can then, you know, provide some information and clarity to the policy committee. Because I know that there was some conversation too about MREP expanding into the Lower St. Croix, which is totally has nothing to do with the funding from the Lower St. Croix. So it was, you know, two completely separate issues. But I want to make sure that we try to nip that in the bud so there isn't confusion. And I know that I've been talking to Barbara and Angie about trying to make sure that the work plans are pretty distinct and clear. But as Angie mentioned on Monday, there's going to be some blurring of lines a little bit because Barbara and Angie are going to be coordinating. And I don't see that as necessarily a problem if we can like synchronize efforts. But if we need to do a better job, like saying this is MREP and this is Lower St. Croix, and there's like a hard line between the two, I'm not sure that that's really the most practical way to deal with that. But if that's something we need to do, I'd love to get feedback from this group as the process moves forward. So that's just kind of heads up, give us feedback. You know, we want to be able to make sure that this works, that it's as efficient as possible and that we're being, you know, super effective. A lot of the things that we're doing are going to change too once the agronomist is on board. But there's just a lot of other stuff going on at the same time. And for me, it's, you know, the more we can work together and more we can kind of coordinate these programs, the better. So, you know, please let us know, reach out to Angie, Barb, whoever.
I'll just throw out there, I got the sense that maybe showing them the, you know, we've got our WBIF budget here, and then you've got your new MREP contract here with all the partners listed out and what they're contributing. Maybe that kind of helps too, is like where the funding is different and then the activities. I think Angie explained the activities pretty well and understanding that there's going to be coordination and learning.
And if it's just one person who's struggling with this, and that, you know, we can only communicate so much. And if that's, you know, we have, as long as we're doing due diligence and we're communicating effectively and making sure we're sharing necessary information, then I think we just keep moving forward.
So Emily, am I hearing you suggest that I maybe that table that I showed to the policy committee meeting on Monday, would it help if I just put like numbers at the top of that table?
The sense that I got, I feel like they always think in very like dollars mindset. So having that element of it might help.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want us to generate too much extra work for Angie and Barbara. If the policy committee as a whole is comfortable with what we're doing, you know, I want to make sure that how we're reacting proportionally to what the real issue is.
Yeah, well, and I don't think it would be that much work if all I'm doing is adding one line at the top that says, here's what MREP is doing and what its annual budget is, and here's what our annual budget is for LSC education. And, you know, it's a pretty large disparity. The amount we're spending on education from the LSC grant is quite small compared to what local partners are already contributing.
Yep.
So that might help to explain too, like why we can't do that much with the Lower St. Croix grant, you know, because it really only comes out to $50,000. spread
Yeah.
out over a 2.5
Lower St. Croix
acre.
program is a half FTE. MREP is 1.5. Exactly.
Small.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Becky, wetlands, is there anything you want to say about that? Or are there any people here in the group that want to express a desire to soon be planning a wetlands project?
Well, I have nothing to add unless, I don't know if I should, there is somebody I've talked to in the group, I'm not sure. Do you want to say your name or not? Mike? I don't know if that's gonna work or not. Did you decide if,
Yeah, Becky and I have been trying to touch base on a wetland restoration project that I have in Goose Lake. It's not a wetland creation project. It's addressing phosphorus loading to an impaired water. And I'm trying to decide whether or not to move forward with an application because the entire drainage area for the wetland is within the priority area for wetland restoration, but the wetland itself is just outside of the boundary. So it's an interesting one, and so we're trying to get together and have a conversation about if the subcommittee would feel that qualifies and if it's worth me going through the effort to put together an entire application. So we'll move forward on that, hopefully for November, and have the subcommittee consider it and see if it moves forward to the steering committee.
yeah, so that would be the one that's come in so far. I know, I look back at our old minutes real quick, and we did talk about, I think, and it came up in the meeting on Monday night, whether it's a first come, first serve. And it seemed like last month or September when we talked about this, we were all okay with each subcommittee deciding that, but are we gonna revisit that at all?
I think, Craig, do you want to speak up since you just sent a note to the planning committee about that yesterday?
That's what I was just gonna say. Becky, I shared that, I guess you're on the planning team. I shared that information with the planning team that I feel this is something we need to at least have discussions about. At this point, we are on a first come, first served basis. We don't have dots on a map that say these are the projects that are priorities. We have priority watersheds and priority areas. So in my opinion, at this point, we are still at a first come, first served basis, which I'd be happy to get more and more projects encumbered. Yes, Jay.
I think I want to add too, that as part of that conversation, first come, first serve is fine if we have 20 potential opportunities and landowner number 10 is the one who's interested in moving now. That's first come, first serve makes a lot of sense. We're not doing projects that aren't priority projects. So I think we need to make sure that that's communicated with the policy committee, is that even though it's first come, first serve, we're still doing priorities.
Yeah,
Jamie,
you
sure.
Number one project may not be interested in moving forward. I mean, it's like, we can't make landowners do things.
Yeah.
right.
I mean, I do understand their question and concern, because if we have like a pot of money sitting there and it just sits there for 2 years and nobody asks for it, then they're going to say, well, if you know there's priority locations for wetland restoration, why didn't you ask somebody to do a project on one of those priority locations? So I can understand that perspective.
Yeah, one of my board members was particularly concerned about the first come, first serve, and part of the background on that was not knowing if we have 20 landowners, 20 project sites that are coming up, or 2, or 40. And so maybe we can do a bit better job of screening, kind of like Becky's saying, for the wetlands, who's got a project concept, so that we can start knowing the scope of what's coming up. It's 2 or 40.
I mean, at this point, we don't have a lot of stuff in the queue at all. So we have limited timeline to spend the money. We're going to be implementing projects that meet our minimum criteria for priority water bodies. Maybe we can just have a queue list, like here are some other projects that people are talking about, but right now that's a very short list. People who have projects are moving forward with them.
Well, and actually I would chime in on that too, just to note that I've got quite a few projects I'd like considered, but it's a lot of work to go through and do an full application for everyone. So if there's an opportunity to do an initial screening with the subcommittees, to have some base information and a discussion about it, and just to make a determination whether or not it's worth going through the work to put together all the materials for the application, that would be great, specifically with the BMP and the wetland groups.
Okay, well, let's set up a time to do that then, Mike, and we'll probably talk here after the meeting then.
Yeah, and I'm thinking also from the perspective of the urban and the ag subcommittee too, Craig, maybe you and I could just coordinate an email and just put a general inquiry out there about potential 2022 projects without a lot of detail behind it. So we have an idea of what might be coming, what might be in the queue for next year.
Emily.
That
I
sounds
see
good,
you
Mike.
have-
That's why I sent that email yesterday to the planning team. So I thought that's what we need to do, get going on that type of scenario. Because if it wasn't for the South Washington Water District project, which is a $175,000 request, we would have 6,000 of our $360,000 requested right now. So we need to do a better job as a team gaining support and giving support to our partners as far as they want to keep moving on a project. So that, starts with the planning team. We can move forward to the subcommittees. I think that's a good way to go about it. Emily?
Yeah, thanks. I wish that we could have conveyed this at the time, but I feel like what we need to convey to the policy committee is, we have some prioritization done in the 10-year plan itself. We know our priority water bodies and the load reductions needed to meet those state standards. And then we also are trying to do some kind of gatekeeping with that project request template of what is the cost benefit and having some sense of, is this a good project or not? But I also feel like we could convey to them, we have targeting built into our work plan. And so that we have a whole subcommittee dedicated to targeting. And so it's kind of, and they've got proposals coming forward, this catchment prioritization, and we're still kind of getting the groundwork laid. But I think we're on a path to doing some good targeting. And I just think it's really worth mentioning over and over that Bowser won't give us any money to do monitoring. I feel like that's such an effective way to do targeting on a small scale for meeting load reductions for a priority water body, but they won't give us, it's not an eligible expense.
Yeah. I think that's good that you brought that up, Emily, because I know I was saying that on Monday too. I'm like, well, we don't necessarily have a list of shovel-ready projects because one of the first things that we said we wanted to use the funds for in this first 2 years was just to do the prioritization to even identify those shovel-ready projects everywhere. So, yeah, that's good to bring back up. I saw a note from
Barb in chat, yeah, and then
yeah,
Melissa.
Barb and then Melissa. Melissa, do you want to go?
Well, I was just going to say, we don't, the monitoring stuff is a policy specific thing to clean water funds. So when those policies are being reviewed and going through that process at committee, that's what I would just encourage you all to, put a comment in, because that's the only way it will be considered to be changed.
When does that happen? When are they reviewed?
Like watershed-based funding went at the same point as the allocations earlier this month. So Barb, do you know if the board approved the next biennium policy today? Clean Water Fund, the competitive stuff is the same thing. It typically goes through maybe in a half a year, a couple months ahead of when the RFP goes live, typically. So the next biennium of funding will be the policy revisions with the next legislative appropriation when those allocations are being defined. So you probably got another year and a half at least on that, but you can make a point when the competitive program policy is going through the same process.
Yo, Matt, more.
We should have a project for next year down on Trout Brook, a continuation of our stream restoration down there at Afton Alps. And so right now we're got a little bit of a concept developed, but we're waiting on 30% plans in February or the 1st of February. So, but hopefully we'll have that project ready for next summer.
Do you know which category that would fit into, Matt?
Help me out, Craig. We talked about it. Was it urban BMP or?
Well, we got the approval on Monday from the PC to combine basically A2 and A5. So we need to work on a work plan amendment. That's on that list of things to discuss at our next planning team meeting. So it depends, Matt, is it more urban or more ag? I mean, it can really be lumped into either one because we're going to combine those $360,000.
Yeah, I mean, it's agricultural land use upstream, and obviously urban around the ski slopes, so.
So for right now, I mean, with our current budget, we put it under activity 5 urban because it has urban for the installations going, but we got to work with Melissa King on amending our work plan budget anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
If any of you haven't had the opportunity to go down to see that project, it's one that's really worth seeing in person. It's a really cool one. And Barbara, it will definitely be on our list for our WCD board tour. We're gonna do a convoy.
I just wanted to call out Barb Heichel's comment that the policy committee should maybe also be reminded about our criterion. Then some prospective projects aren't moving forward because they are being identified as not necessarily priority or not meeting the priority or the criterion. So, I mean, I think that is a good point, that if there's a difference between us just not reviewing projects and us saying, oh, actually this one isn't a high one, we're gonna hold out, so that does kind of get to like Janet's concern. Like, we are gonna hold out for something that's a higher priority activity. This one isn't quite meeting, the criterion right now.
Yeah, and I think if we just explain to Janet that, where we are in the process and how negotiations with landowners work and how many projects we're going to have to implement to actually achieve our goals, and that we're not going to be doing any low quality projects at all, that I don't think she's going to be concerned. I think that's going to address her questions.
Okay. Internal analyses, Susanna, I know that you spoke about this on Monday and that you've got your call for projects due October 31st.
Yes, thanks. And no major updates. Yeah,
okay.
No major updates since I gave the update on Monday, other than, yes, officially Rush and Goose Lake associations are interested in applying. So it's just a matter of submitting that call for projects response. And then our subcommittee meeting is on November 3rd. So we'll review all the responses and give any feedback to the partners. And we're on target for all of our timelines. The application deadline is December 15th. And so we'll know more after our November 3rd meeting, but I think we're on track.
So for Rush and Goose Lake, would they be asking Chisago County to apply on their behalf? Is that the way that would
right?
work? Okay.
Yes, right. They'd have to have a project sponsor for that. Yes.
Okay.
So knowing that we're only able to fund 2 lakes with the current funding possible, if all of the studies come back at the estimated $25,000 per study. But it's great that there is interest in applying for the funding.
Okay, so then let's move to the meat of it, the things that we get to vote on and allocate money for, right? Enhanced street sweeping program. Would you like for me to pull up the memo that I sent to everybody? Would that help to have it on screen?
Yeah, actually, Angie, since I'm going to be speaking to it, will you want to just give me the ability?
I can do that. That is an even better idea.
You don't even give me the opportunity to hand it off to you, Mike, and do the big drum roll for IC's cool memos, but okay, fine.
All right. So our first item is actually on page 8 of the packet is where it starts. And what this is it's a proposal from Ems and Oliver Resources to develop the protocol for evaluating the enhanced street sweeping program. So the project request form is filled out here. I imagine that there's still quite a few items to be determined on this. For example, what is the estimated load reduction and what's the TSS reduction of target water bodies, primarily because we don't have the evaluations done yet. But the eligible communities per the plan, there's actually, I believe there's 20 here: Rust City, Harris, North Branch, etc., all the way down. And these are all eligible locations for enhanced street sweeping incentive payments that we identified as part of the planning process. So direct discharge to target water bodies. Rush Creek, Goose Creek, Sunrise, and St. Croix is really what the enhanced street sweeping program is targeting. In a little bit down in the memo here, I included our current draft version 5.2 of our enhanced street sweeping program. We're getting close. And so I anticipate soon this will be back to the steering committee for the program framework, but it's not quite there yet. I still need to go through a couple of more subcommittee meetings to make sure that both the urban subcommittee and the targeting and prioritization subcommittee are in place. But the reason I attached the draft is that if communities are interested, essentially the way the program will work is they'll submit an application, and then once the application is received, that will free up funding to do this enhanced street sweeping plan, which basically identifies the direct drainage to those priority water bodies, and then identifies current sweeping frequency. And then where this proposal comes in and is important is the evaluation will include the identified canopy cover based on tree canopy assessment protocol. So what this proposal is doing is developing that protocol, and then the plan, the process will then go forward in identifying increased sweeping frequency in late spring, early summer, and fall in medium and high density canopy cover areas. And then the output of that effort will be color-coded maps that go back to the community for consideration for enhanced sweeping. And then they use that document as their application to the Lower St. Croix Partnership for enhanced street sweeping incentive payments. So that's how it works. And then here is the scope. This identified, so some definitions, then protocol for visual assessment, which we debated whether or not we would need this because we anticipate that we're going to do all of this via digital evaluation and assessment, and that's the real meat of this proposal. But it will be nice just for consistency to be able to have visual protocol in circumstances where we're actually doing on the ground evaluation of canopies to make sure that we have consistency. But really what we're looking at is letter C, which is the workflow for automated tools, including parameters and steps for digital assessment of canopy cover. So the estimated hours and cost, EOR anticipates this could take up to 65 hours at a cost not to exceed $8,500. And so the prioritization subcommittee has reviewed and recommended this proposal for funding. And so I'm bringing it forward on their behalf.
Make a motion to approve.
Well, for being formal, I'll second that.
For discussion, I have a question just to make sure that I'm clear on it. Of all these communities that were listed, the guidance isn't going to be run for each of those. Is it actually just like basically a GIS protocol that's being created? And then who would actually take that and run it for each one of these? Or that's what you were saying, then you would go back to those communities and say, all right, we have this protocol. So for $3,000 to $5,000, we would run it for you. Is that what you were saying? I just want to make sure I understood it very clearly, what the outcomes were.
Sure, yeah, so you're correct that this proposal is for the protocol. And then the program would provide $3,000 to $5,000 to develop the enhanced street sweeping plan. And I would anticipate there'd be probably just one of two groups that would do this, either local staff, either the conservation district or the watershed district, or through reimbursement of their time. Or it could be a consultant, like for example, the city of Stillwater wanted to use their engineering firm for the city to develop the assessment, then we would provide them with the guidance, and then they would run it based on that guidance. And the application for the city of Stillwater would be reimbursement of $3,000 to $5,000 to develop the enhanced street sweeping plan.
Per community.
Correct.
Okay.
Mike, we have a couple questions in the chat from
Thank you.
Bowser.
Okay. Let's
You
see.
want me to open them up and read them to you, Mike, since
Yeah, I
you're
was just
sharing the
trying to-
screen?
Yeah, since I'm
Okay,
sharing, it should
Barb
disappear.
says, I thought somebody already had the protocol developed. And Melissa says, can you clarify how this fits with the process developed by Comfort Lake Forest Lake for Forest Lake? So that's two similar questions. Like,
This
so
is all done by
basically,
Paula, yeah.
yeah. So basically, how is this different than what was already created for Forest Lake?
So Forest Lake, Comfort Lake Watershed District did not actually, the report does not actually have the protocol for evaluating canopy cover. It's the result of implementing a protocol to evaluate canopy cover. And so in the program development process, the subcommittees had identified the need to have consistent protocol for developing these enhanced street sweeping plans. And that actually doesn't exist anywhere right now, especially the component, both of those components, both visual assessment and the digital assessment process for street corridor evaluation.
So basically, this is creating the protocol so that then anybody could implement it. Like you were saying, the city engineer could implement it on their own and not have to hire somebody else to implement it for them.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. It basically is the guidance that will be part of our sub-watershed assessment protocol to make sure that each time somebody does a sub-watershed assessment or an enhanced street sweeping plan, it's consistent and it delivers the same sort of results that were delivered through the assessment work that's been done based on the University of Minnesota studies. I mean, that's our goal. And we could go without this proposal and just try to figure it out on our own, but it would delay us significantly since none of our local technical staff have done this. Or the other option would be we could hire consulting firms to do this work without knowing what the protocol is, but then that would probably be the least cost-effective approach. And there, I think we have capacity. We have capacity for everything else with local staff, including in some of our larger cities, to conduct these street sweeping studies, with the exception of the protocol for how to evaluate canopy cover, whether it's low, medium, or high density, and do that consistently. And then more importantly, have the workflow to have that automated so it's not a street by street aerial analysis.
Lots of questions.
I'm typing right now. Will somebody else read the questions?
Okay, so let's see. Jamie asked, is the outcome that tree cover for each street will be ranked as high, medium, low? Does that simplistic ranking require a sophisticated protocol? I'm just going to do each of them in order. And then
Okay.
Emily got her hand up after Emily did a chat.
Yeah, actually, so my my take on reading the research, and I'm by no means the expert in enhanced street sweeping plan development, is that yes, that is the ranking is whether it's low, medium, or high density, and that is the primary determinant on sweeping frequency. When you combine that with connectivity to surface water, target surface waters. But with that, I'll hand it over to Emily. If you have some answers, that'd be great.
I'm not sure I do have answers on like the technical element of it, of why the protocol is needed. My understanding is that you want it written down because otherwise you're saying, here's the Forest Lake enhanced street sweeping, do it like that. But what does doing it like that really mean? And so this is detailing it out in explicit terms for people to follow.
Jamie, do you have an alternative proposal?
No, I'm simply, imagining the comment back that we'd spend $8,500 to determine if the street has lots of trees. And I'm saying that, sort of sarcastically and, very high level. I want to make sure that can defend that, that there's good scientific reasoning behind it. I don't have another suggestion.
I mean, this is one of those things, I think Mike got this proposal because Paula's like the expert and she did the Comfort Lake work and she's kind of our go-to reference for this. And so we'd be asking her advice on how to actually set up these protocols. And this is what the estimate came out to be. It is $8,500 for her to answer those questions. Like how should we be doing this in the future? If we want to have somebody internally kind of take a look at, sorry, Mike, but this is one of those things. It's like, if we want to have somebody internally who's willing to kind of take this on and draft up the protocol and kind of look at the Comfort Lake work, identify the procedures, document those procedures for the rest of the group to use. So then we can actually start identifying where we're going to and developing those street sweeping plans, then I would love to see an alternative. And if it's going to take, $2,000 to $3,000 to $5,000 of staff time to do that, that would be cheaper than $8,000. And so, but then Paula is like the one who did the Comfort Lake work, and she is kind of like the recognized expert in this work. So that the reason the subcommittee supported this is because we didn't really have anybody who was identified who'd really take the lead on drafting up the protocol. Jamie?
Right. I hear what you're saying. I'm looking at the work plan too, the grant work plan and the funds that we have available for this work. And it's clear that we do have targeted street sweeping analysis is one of the things we're doing for $40,000 or
right.
So that's one of the things I'm refreshing my memory on as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things too, as we're communicating about this, is that we really need to emphasize that Paul is the one who did the Comfort Lake work and that she is kind of the lead contractor and recognized expert in this sort of thing. And that staff is going to be learning these protocols and taking over, so we can do it at more of the staff level and more cost effectively. But at this point, relying on the consultant expertise. We also have another question from Jerry. I'm curious how the eligible communities were chosen. None of the communities in the Chisago Lakes area were included. I don't have an answer to that one.
From what I recall, so those communities and those target water bodies were identified during the plan development process. And so that's been, I don't recall how we got to that list of communities. I think it was primarily directed toward highly contributing to the St. Croix River for those water bodies and the St. Croix Direct. But that was identified during that process and part of the plan since the initial draft.
I recall that from the plan development that it was communities that either direct drain to the St. Croix River or to a tributary to the river, so not communities that were lakes.
So I don't know. I mean, I think in response to Jerry that we would need to work with Bowser to do some adjustments to our prioritization in the plan to then be able to adjust where we're implementing these practices.
But it's still, the protocol is the protocol. So once it's actually developed, it's just there's not funding then to have the community necessarily do this themselves, take the protocol and implement it. If just, any of the other entities feel like there's other communities where this would be valuable, you could then take that protocol, or anybody could take that protocol that, and run it. It's just not eligible for reimbursement through the watershed-based funding grant.
Correct.
There's still benefit to other communities as well, right? Once this is written down.
Yeah, and I would note, Jerry, I don't know if your mic is working because earlier I saw you, I think you were trying to speak, but we weren't hearing anything on our end.
Yeah, Craig, I'll just put the comment in of let's check in on the detailed grant work plan. 'Cause I'm looking through that now in terms of where kind of the planning and assessment activities were taking place. It's specifically noting 2 types of analysis, SWAS and targeted street sweeping analysis, and then in parentheses, it's not necessarily swap protocol. So I just want to make sure that if the intent is to develop some of the protocol aspects for these activities, like let's make sure that that's actually within the work plan itself. So.
Barb is looking up in the plan what cities are being named. And then Emily did make a comment that my understanding is that the outcome of this proposal is to codify the protocols, which I think we've already covered.
I do know that the cities are listed in the WBIF grant work plan. Oh, Emily found it. Emily
Yeah.
was,
Of course.
The cities are listed in the 10-year plan, but tables 5.2 and 5.3 are in the 10-year plan. And if I recall, we looked at those and then wrote down the cities when we're developing our work plan. I don't think you'll find a list of the cities in the 10-year plan.
okay. They are in the WBIF grant work plan, though. I remember them being listed there.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Jerry. We probably would have a process to go through if we specifically identified cities. And Melissa just pasted it.
Well, did we miss Chisago City, Lindstrom, and Center City? Which priority water bodies do those drain to? I would think they would drain to one of those things in table 5.2 or 5.3.
When they outlet, they drain to the Sunrise River. Because I think Jerry's mic isn't working.
And the Chisago Chain of Lakes is a priority as well. Isn't it?
Yes, he says.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, maybe do we need to do a work plan amendment to add those to our list of cities, as well as clarify Melissa's question about if developing the protocols is an eligible grant expense in our work plan?
Yeah, this is what I say. If it's a priority resource within the plan itself, it's less of a process to let's get this detailed work plan updated with what activities you want to complete, or if there's other resources that still fall under the plan priority resources that just maybe was an oversight that wasn't added onto this list.
I would support that process of looking at the work plan to add those water bodies if they are priority water bodies in the plan itself. So, and we know that there might be interest and match from the lid, right, Jerry?
Yes.
Oh, I heard him that time.
Yep. I don't think that really affects our approval of this protocol codification, but it's a good prompt for initiating that conversation with Bowser and updating the work plan if we need to. Thanks, Jerry.
Okay, so do we want to move forward with doing a roll call vote now to approve this with the intention to amend the work plan to include the Chisago lid cities? Or is this something we need to postpone until next month?
I think we can move forward. This is just protocol development.
Yeah,
My
that's
suggestion would be approve this request And then the planning team already has other work plan discussions we need to have at our next PT meeting. And if you can add that to the list of work plan
Things to talk
amendment
about.
adjustments we need to talk to, we make that,
Yep.
because we need to make sure that what is in our plan.
Okay.
And
So,
then Melissa was saying we need to get the grant work plan updated before we spend the funds. So yes, we'll make sure that you're cool with, that Bowser's cool with us spending the funds before we actually start getting work going and cutting checks. I don't want to take the risk of us not being able to have a reimbursable contract.
okay, then, shall I run through to do a roll call vote then? Are people okay with me doing that?
Yeah, I just want to say we've reached out to several of our local communities already, and they are 100% supportive of this. We have buy-in from several of our local towns, so they're waiting. As soon as we can get this going, we have the capacity here to start doing the assessment work once we have the protocol, and we have cities that will be signing up right away. So I know Emily has just the same way down there with Wyoming. So we have numerous communities in our county ready to go.
That's awesome to hear, Craig.
Yeah, we've done some outreach with them already, and they're ready to go. So.
Okay, since we have both Becky and Jamie, who is speaking for Anoka SWCD? Do we have Becky speaking for Anoka and then Jamie speaking for Sunrise River in terms of votes?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Anoka SWCD, Becky.
Aye.
Okay, Karen for Browns Creek.
Hi.
Mike for Carmer.
Aye.
Okay, Susanna for Chisago.
Aye.
Jerry for Chisago Lid. Jerry, I assume he's typing something in the chat.
He gave a thumbs
Yes,
up.
he did. Okay, Craig.
Yes, but we need to discuss who's going to be the contract holder on this one moving forward. All projects like this, so we need to have a discussion afterwards.
That's a really
Yes.
good conversation, Craig. I know who I would nominate.
Okay, let me just type that. Moving forward. Okay, continuing the roll call vote then, we are on to Emily for Comfort Lake Forest Lake.
Aye.
Okay, Isani County, do we have somebody from Isani County on right now?
We do not.
Okay, that is what I thought. Do we have Tiffany on from Isani SWCD?
Yes, and I.
Okay. Matt Downing.
Aye.
Okay, Pine County, do we have Caleb on?
Aye.
Yes, all right. Paul for Pine SWCD.
Aye.
Okay, Matt Moore. Matt Moore. Is he still here? Have we lost him? Have we lost Matt Moore? Ask him.
No, Matt's still there.
I know, I'm asking him to unmute. I'm sending little pings. Okay, I'm gonna skip him. Jamie for Sunrise.
Aye.
Okay, we have nobody from Valley Branch. Do we think we're ever gonna have anybody from Valley Branch attend? Just idly wondering. Jay from WCD.
Aye.
Okay. Well, there's plenty to carry it, so if Matt comes back, I'll just.
And we have Washington County as well.
Yes, oh, sorry, Washington County fell down on the second page and I missed that. Maureen?
Aye. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you. Okay, so then let's move on to the next proposal that we have for consideration.
Before we move on to the next proposal that Mike's taking the lead on, I want to thank Mike for taking the lead on that proposal.
Okay.
Did you want to have a discussion about hosting as far as contracts and funding now or after the next proposal discussion?
We can go through this one and wrap it up at the end. That's fine, Mike.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yep. So, this proposal is looking at two areas of the Lower St. Croix partnership where we really don't have sufficient data to complete sub-watershed analysis work. And let me kind of pull up a quick map here. Do you notice how clean my desktop is? Okay. All right. So on this map, you can see the green area here are the contributing catchments in Pine County with a little bit of the northern section in Chisago. And what this map came from, the St. Croix Partnership map of completed sub-watershed analysis work that's been done. And then just generally this large yellow area up here is really all tributary to the Sunrise River system. And so this yellow area and this green area, the areas that we really don't have data, and we're going to need to generate right from the beginning catchments and then pollutant loads to the Sunrise, which is going to the St. Croix, as well as the contributing subcatchments for the Pine. Everything else on this map, so the escarpment area, Chisago Lakes area, Comfort Lake, Forest Lake, Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District, all of these locations already have either have sub-watershed analysis done or they have all of their subcatchments delineated already. Like Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District and Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District have XP swim models for all their contributing areas. So instead of having each conservation district or county gather this information on their own, there were a small group of us were tasked with looking at proposals to do prioritization and assessment, or I'm sorry, catchment determination and hotspot loading in these areas. So we're working with EOR, specifically Mike Talbot, who did the catchment work for the Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District, as well as our hotspot modeling, which is on our map, our online map on the website. And he took a look at existing delineated catchments and found this NHD plus high resolution catchments at the federal level that are done. And then he took a look at accuracy for all these different layers in comparison with the real detailed work that we've done in the Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District, and found that it matched up really well with previous efforts, but then also noted that if I look at these graphics here, you can see all the yellow lines in here. These are the scale of our catchments. The NDH plus is quite a bit larger, but in their initial evaluation, because of such a large area, it would be economical to take that information and then hydrocorrect it. And hydrocorrecting is done through applying things like culverts and bridges that are available from either the state or the local units of government, and hydrocorrecting those and basically establishing all of our delineated catchments in those two big areas within the watershed. So their estimate to do that work would be about 214 hours and about $26,772 is the estimate. So we actually got to this number after a couple of iterations, and the subcommittee felt that this was definitely worth funding, and it actually helps us move along. So in our sub-watershed analysis work plan for this year, the big one is we were hoping to get this work done. We had targeted to get this work done on the Sunrise, and so this moves us down the path of the Sunrise. We're currently continuing work with EOR, and later we'll be coming back and talking about the potential of taking the Sunrise River data, these catchments that are, and then moving it into pollutant hotspot loading. So looking at all of these specific catchments and then identifying pollutant hotspots. I did miss one component here, apologies. So not only are we going to identify the catchments and hydrocorrect them, but the third component of this total work plan is to identify highly connected or highly landlocked catchments. So we're basically starting that prioritization process, which is what we found to be so valuable through this process at the Carnelian Marine Sanctuary Watershed District, because we took whole sections of the watershed out of consideration for voluntary BMPs or for capital improvement projects, because they actually were highly landlocked, and so they weren't contributing to our target water bodies. So that's the proposal, and with that, I apologize that wasn't the clearest presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mike, is this coming out of the A8 activity? A8 target analysis activity budget?
Yes, it is. I believe through discussions with Casey and Jay that there was $50,000 identified, and so far out of that $50,000, there's only been funding allocation to the subwatershed assessment protocol development.
Yeah, just to clarify, A8 has an overall budget of $150,000, and not all of it has been specifically allocated to SWA activities. And so the funds that haven't been dedicated toward developing SWAs or other prioritization within those areas identified in the work plan is available for this type of work.
So you're looking at, so in the work plan, there's approximately $90,000 that's budgeted, $90,000 to $100,000 that's actually listed in there for prioritization. The other 50 is where this would come out of.
Correct.
Barb and Melissa, do we have to do any kind of work plan amendment for that? I mean, is there anything we need to do to add this for budgeting purposes for the fiscal agent?
I would just say, let's call it out. We're gonna have to revise this detailed work plan attachment anyway, so let's just put it in there.
Okay, thank you. And Mike, I do support this proposal. I just want to make sure it clarifies the fiscal agent.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking that at the time that you're working with Melissa to amend for this, I can also share the next phase that we're working on, which may be hotspot pollutant loading, which would be occurring hopefully with this funding, if it's approved by the subcommittee and the and this body. So it may be worth considering leaving some language in there to make sure that we don't have to go and amend again if the committee's passed that initiative for the sunrise.
At the next planning team meeting, Angie, can you make sure to add all these items on there for discussion?
Yeah, could you say that again, Mike? A proposal for hotspot?
Yeah, pollutant hotspot evaluation for the Sunrise River. And I see that Emily has a question.
Yeah, I had kind of a clarifying question to get back to like boring process protocol stuff. So you filled out as far as the project request packet goes, having that cover memo and the applicable attachment. If it's a wetland restoration, the wetland attachment, that. We still have on that list of attachments that we need to do the prioritization attachments, and that's going to be kind of two-phase, the SWA targeting studies and then the street sweeping. This doesn't really fall into either of those categories. And it sounds like the hotspot one, I'm just wondering, how is this project request packet complete as it could be? Because we're still waiting on those additional attachments for the protocols of what a targeting analysis should be. Does that make any sense?
It does, Emily, and I think that's a great question. Unfortunately, our protocol for targeting analysis is going to be for doing SWAs or other type of studies, and doesn't actually address, we're not going to have a protocol for identifying whether or not we should develop a protocol. Or we're not going to have does this meet gatekeeper criteria for doing a SWA, because this is data needed to conduct the SWA. So the forms that we're developing for that wouldn't work for these types of applications.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, and that's why I think in this case, this is a special situation where we're developing base. It'd be like if we're developing MLCCS land cover data for a big portion of the basin. That's base data or soils data. That's base data necessary to do any of these analyses. And so I think these are special circumstances that we wouldn't develop a separate form to be able to evaluate that we have to have the flexibility to be able to say that this is just core information necessary to conduct our prioritization and targeting efforts.
Okay,
So
thank you.
whatever we would need for you, so you can tell Bowser that this is, maybe we need a plan reference or some other way to satisfy your reporting needs. Maybe that'll help you with that side of things. Because I totally hear where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we'll talk more about how that work plan goes, and I don't the request process I don't think is necessarily a requirement of Bowser and our reporting, but so much as just we had wanted to have a process identified for these things. But I get that this is kind of different.
Right.
Jamie, can you expand on your question, please? I think that's a good question to bring up to the group.
Yeah, and I was just sending that to you, Craig, but I was sort of thinking through this, not to bring us off topic at all, but the grant work plan, if it's amended, a policy committee and the governing bodies have to approve our annual work plan. If the grant work plan is our annual work plan, would it need to go back to all of those groups for a vote?
Oh,
Now,
Pushing
into
it
a
back to at
negative.
least, pushing it back potentially to February.
Right, and I don't know that that's the case, but I'm thinking it through.
Was on Monday, the policy committee's action was to authorize some level of work plan amendment. It really focused on the budget element. But does like administrative clarification such as this fall into that kind of category?
Yeah,
Their approval on Monday allowed us to, as a planning team, which came to the steering committee last meeting, to do work plan revisions under the $50,000 amount and combined activities 2 and 5 for combined cost share amount of $360,000. So I don't think it gave us that approval. How do we handle, so in this situation, we have a $150,000 budget, and really it's no different than many of our activities. We have a $150,000 budget for activity 8. And only about $90,000 of it is called out. So I mean, if this is meeting, the activity description is 2 general types analysis, sub-watershed assessments and targeted street sweeping. If this is a needed activity to help refine the sub-watershed assessments, then in my opinion, this would not need a work plan amendment, because it's no different than like activity 2 or 5 that doesn't have specific projects called out. It goes through a subcommittee, to a steering committee to get approved. It's not a dot on a map that says we're gonna do these projects. This one is saying this is correct me if I'm wrong, is this a SWAB type process?
This is support for SWAs, yes. It'd be the same thing as the SWA protocol.
what I'm hearing you say, Craig, is we're not changing the work plan. We're just providing more detail as to what we're doing with the funds already allocated in the work plan, correct?
Correct, and it's for a high priority water body, which is listed in table 5.2 or 5.3, which the Sunrise River is one of them. I don't think this has to be go into here then as a work plan amendment. I think this just falls under, we have $50,000 to $60,000 of funds that are not earmarked in this annual plan, just like we do in several of the activities. And this is part of the requirements for a sub-watershed assessment.
And I will say,
Go ahead.
yeah, I would say it's clarification to the detailed, like the actual E-Link work plan. This is the supplemental attachment to that. So I think too, it's how this collaboration is viewing the collaborations work plan for implementation of the plan, and that's a distinct and separate difference from the grant work plan. They mean two different things, because at some point you're going to have multiple funding and other funding sources besides Bowser's to be implementing your plan. So I just want to make sure people are clear there's a separation between those things.
When I'm looking at the E-Link work plan, what I'm reading from is the approved E-Link work plan.
Yep. The detailed supplemental.
Yes.
I think if you're fitting it in that SWA category, it's probably fine. But you know, where I'm getting with some of the enhanced street sweeping, like development of protocols, is a little different than providing incentives for that kind of thing. And I'm just using an example of that's where we want to be clear with how the grant funds are utilized from our end. But if something like this is falling under a SWA activity, it's fine. It can, if it can be more clear, I think that's always helpful. But
and I can't remember what your process is for in your JPA. It talks about the process for the policy committee and entities approving your annual work plan, but not, you know, for amendments. And I haven't looked at it carefully. That's for amending your comprehensive watershed management plan, not amending a grant work plan. And I can't find my copy of your bylaws for the policy committee now that you're in implementation stage. So maybe there's something in there.
Oh, Matt Downing just pasted it.
yeah, there's what I'm saying. I think it just works out that the annual work plan for this year is also equivalent to this fiscal year grant work plan. But right, you're going to have other funding sources soon to be implementing, and not all plan activities are going to be eligible for Bowser funds. So you're going to be working outside of that avenue probably pretty quickly.
So just to make sure I'm following correctly, what I'm hearing is that both the enhanced street sweeping protocol development and then this catchment delineation and identifying connectivity in prioritized areas to the St. Croix and the Sunrise River are actually currently included as part of the SWA work plan. They're just not specifically identified as activities under the SWA work plan. Because I believe we had, well, I actually know that we had completing work for the Sunrise River. And so this was really, instead of the Chisago Conservation District doing the catchment delineation work, we're just basically grouping it together with the Pine to do that catchment delineation work, but it's still all the first step of the sub-watershed analysis process.
Mike, I think you've got it right. And there is more in the JPA about these annual work plans being approved by the policy committee and then the governing bodies. And it seems to me that the work that's being proposed today fits within the annual work plan, but we're talking about amending the annual work plan, or at least the grant work plan, I should say, just to be more specific and clear. And my concern, as I brought this up, was that by amending the grant work plan, we could trigger concerns from the policy committee that the work plan was changed and they didn't have the approval process. I think it would be silly to bring this through all the governing bodies, because I think as it's written today, what's proposed fits within the work plan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we need to go through this process of amending.
I see. So your point is not, does this require policy committee approval, but more so this shouldn't require a work plan amendment because it already fits with the grant work plan.
Correct. But if we do the grant work plan amendment, it can trigger concerns from the policy committee that there's been some change in direction that they weren't involved
Got
in.
you. I hear what you're saying.
And I think we need to be remembrance that it's not policy committee approval, it's always policy committee recommendation, because the policy committee doesn't have the approval authority. Unfortunately, they're to JPC. They make a recommendation back to their boards if we need motions. I am comfortable with this because I think it does fall under, I mean, I feel very comfortable that it falls under the SWAP protocol. And it's like Mike said, it's the step one for moving forward to do steps 2 and 3 and 4, correct, Mike?
Correct.
Same with the targeted street sweeping analysis. I think those are things we have to have. We have to have that protocol set up so we can do the assessment. So I'm comfortable with both of these moving forward. If the rest of this group is also comfortable.
Yeah, I also want to point out that there are lots of points in this work plan where there's dollars available that aren't specifically allocated. And that as long as it's meeting the intent of that work plan item, and this definitely does under prioritization and targeting, I think this does meet what we already have written into the work plan.
I appreciate Jamie and others bringing that up for the concern as a fiscal agent. And so we need to make sure we're always conscious of that as we're moving forward.
Okay.
Barb and Melissa, do you have any comments otherwise?
My only comment is let's make sure how you all are viewing this detailed work plan is consistent with how I'm interpreting what activities are eligible. So we're not running into issues down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking like you could, I mean, you have to do an amendment for fiscal thing, but you could say, and while we're doing that, we added some clarifications under these programs, like you're not doing a big change. So I don't know if, I mean, I don't want you guys to not get paid for stuff that is eligible because you didn't have that in your activities. So I'd rather fix it now. And if the worry is that just if it's always going to be a worry that you have to go back to your local boards, then maybe you start that JPE conversation sooner, because that shouldn't limit the types of things you guys are doing. So again, I'm just talking out loud, Craig. I haven't had enough time to think about it.
And Barb, that same thought was sent to the planning team yesterday, that we need to start having more discussion of JPE versus JPC, because we have, unfortunately, we have a policy committee. Some members struggle with it not being a JPE and trying to run it like a JPE almost. So we have to be mindful of that. And we want to, my board's on record of supporting a JPE. So I think we need to continue to have a discussion if with the next work plan, if nothing else.
Do we feel comfortable taking a roll call vote right now?
I guess I have a question for Mike as the lead on this activity. If my board approves both of these pending Bowser approving those work plan, I mean, how do we move forward with this one to make sure that everybody's covered? Whoever's going to be the lead on this one.
I guess I don't understand what your question is. What do you
Well,
mean everyone is
as
covered?
the fiscal agent, we're responsible for approving these agreements, sub-agreements, and writing the check when the product is completed. And if Bowser's going to say, nope, that was not an eligible expense or project, you know, my board's going to want assurance from Bowser that this is an approved plan. So we're going to have something. You know, we're going to figure it out with Bowser before we approve this, I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I guess that's the question then. Is there, I mean, the process seems really cumbersome to me already. So I hesitate to say this, but do we need then every time we're reviewing a proposal to have Bowser review it and provide a statement that it meets our work plan before we bring it to these committees?
Oh, boy.
I know.
I mean, that's kind of what it feels like right now. Because otherwise, what I just heard Barb and Melissa say is we have no assurance that what we're improving that they believe meets our work plan because we haven't included them in the process.
Barb said that 90% of our activities are straightforward. I think this is pretty straightforward. I just want to go back to what Jamie was saying, is that we have $150,000 under A8. And this is work definitely needed for us to be able to prioritize and target.
And Melissa, one thing I think I heard you say was that if some of these funds were intended for on-the-ground practices and instead they're being used for studies, that would be a concern. In this case, the activity 8 is entirely for studies and specifically the subwatershed assessments in the tree or the street sweeping. So I think it fits nicely in that, and it's not a deviation from the grant work plan. My thought.
I like Emily's idea too. My board meets November 9th, so they'll, we can approve these November 9th, just pending kind of final discussions with Bowser on the 10th. And then once we get kind of the assurance there, but I agree with Jay. I mean, I think this is well within the scope of this activity, so. I think we vote.
Okay, so Bowser will attend the planning team meeting. Okay, is everybody else okay with us taking a vote right now?
Go for it.
All right.
Angie, it's Matt. What are we voting on? I'm sorry, I just got off the phone.
Yes, Matt. So previously we were voting on the street sweeping proposal, and now we are voting on the prioritization of catchments proposal. Do you remember the difference between the two?
Sure.
The street sweeping proposal is about formalizing the protocol that we're going to use to prioritize street sweeping, and it's for $8,000. We already approved it. So if you want to join in and with the approval or what, that's great, Matt. We can go back to that, but it's already been approved. The current one is for $26,000 to delineate and prioritize contributing catchments within Pine County and the Sunrise River.
I don't need to go back to street sweeping, and that's what we said we were going to do. Was there needs to be information in the north half of the watershed.
Exactly.
All right.
And if Bowser doesn't like it, I don't care.
So
But the fiscal agent cares.
I will anticipate your yes vote when I get to you on the roll call.
Jay, Craig, I'll come and visit you in clean water jail, okay?
Okay, Becky.
Aye.
Karen. Mike Eisensee. You still there, Mike?
I'm an I. I was just had too many layers open.
Yeah, I had to find my mute button.
All right, that's okay. I'm just trying to rush us along since I know we hit 2:30. Susanna? Is she still here? I see her. Oh, she's an
Got a
I.
chat aye. Yep.
Okay, Jerry already sent me his I before he left the meeting. Craig?
Aye.
Emily, have you left yet? She says I have to leave within the, you're here?
Aye.
Okay. Tiffany?
Aye.
Matt Downing?
Aye.
Caleb?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Matt Moore?
I vote the same way as Matt Downing, so
Okay.
you can count it as two.
Jamie?
Aye.
Okay, Jay?
Aye.
And Maureen?
Aye.
Okay, ayes have it. Do we need to review the cumulative progress towards water quality goals? Emily did.
Angie, we
share
need to
them.
go back and discuss who's actually the sub agreements with on these. So we have a bigger issue here. We have projects that are coming forward from activities and activity 8 to potential activity 7 and other activities. I am fine with the Chisago SWC being the subcontract holder, because we don't have to then have a sub agreement with somebody who's collecting the paperwork and sending it back to us. But in that situation, I don't want to be necessarily the project lead, because we don't need to take on every project like this one and be the project lead, which can be a lot of work. And so I'm fine with an activity lead, in this case, Mike Eisensee being the subcontract holder, and we have a sub agreement with them. Or I'm fine with when we get things approved, we have the contract directly with EOR. I really don't care. I just want to make sure we do some kind of consistency across the board, because we're going to have these situations where they are kind of watershed or partial watershed wide projects.
I see your question. So is
So
it
Mike,
Chicago
Mike, are
SWCD
you-
that has the contract with EOR, but
Yep.
somebody else is running the project?
So Mike, are you willing to be the project lead for both of these and support Craig?
Yeah, right. I think there's a bigger conversation here too, which is, you know, I'm hundreds of hours a year right now through the Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District, developing these programs and leading these initiatives. So I really can't make the commitment without talking to my board. And I think there would be another question, which is, you know, is there a possibility to cover some of my time leading some of these bigger initiatives that don't really impact the watershed district that's currently paying me?
Yeah, I think that's
Good question, Mike. We have excess administration funds available. We'd have to look at the work plan and see what's allowable and what's not. I don't know that. That's a very good question. Do we have funding available for these watershed wide type projects? Yes, Jay.
I think if we're gonna be, and Barb's gonna like this one, because since we're gonna be talking about work plan amendments anyway, why don't we talk about adding some time for an agreement with Carnelian Marine to do some, you know, subcontract coordinator role or something like that? Because I see Mike playing a role like this for other activities as well.
Well, Jay, we're gonna have to do that. Because Mike can't spend his watershed dollars outside of his watershed.
Correct.
Well, that's where I'm going with this one, Matt, exactly, because I mean, I'm willing to be the contract holder, but we can't take on the same role here for us. We can't do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, even though you're county based, but then you don't stretch in, you know,
No.
to the other counties, but yeah, we got to figure out a way to, it's the same with the construction engineering.
Mm-hmm.
If Mike's gonna lead this stuff all over the watershed, then
That's sounding like yet again another reason to have a conversation about a joint power entity instead of a joint power agreement,
I
right?
was thinking the exact same thing, Karen, that I was like, this just goes back to the fact that we don't have staff, that we are just all operating as partners.
good point, Karen.
Yeah, we got a thumbs up from Paul.
So on Jay and Angie, I have a question under activity 10. It says the lead organization, the Washington Conservation District, coordination among PC, SC, AC, and work plan activities planning teams. Could you justify billing for being a team lead, for doing it, for being the sub-agreement holder for these types of projects as the coordinator among those committees? I guess I'm asking the team that, this whole steering committee maybe.
You're meaning, would that fit without us having to modify the grant work plan?
Because that means it has to go back to the policy committee potentially and back to our local boards.
I mean, these are two small projects and they're relatively straightforward. So, but I mean, I want to be sensitive to what Mike's saying too, is that he has been putting a lot of time into this. So we can't keep having Carmar subsidize basin scale activities. So we need to figure out a solution to that. But if in this situation, if we don't want to have to go through the work plan amendment process and the committee's okay with the WCD providing that oversight support for you, Craig, to actually hold the contract, then I think we could probably do that.
Well, it's just, the agreement has to be with somebody. And so, I mean, my board can approve the Chisago SWC having an agreement with, I think both these with EOR, correct, Mike?
Correct.
So I mean, we
You would
could
have the agreement with EOR.
And that's perfectly fine with me.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense, to be honest with you, for our office to be the lead on the catchment one, because it's the Sunrise and it's 80% our county. I mean, the watershed. So I mean, we're no problem with that one. And again, the street sweeping one, I don't think it's gonna be a ton of work. And I mean, I think going forward, we need to have this discussion about how we're gonna deal with these. Is more the bigger issue here. So,
Maybe it's the work plan for the next biennium, and we try to keep things under what we currently have for now, and then save this for conversation for another day.
so under fiscal agent administration, it says end contract coordination includes coordinate with other partners to gather reporting information, reviewing draft reports, will also include leading any grant work plan amendments as necessary. Mike, I see, would you be okay then if the Chisago SBC just took the lead and was the contract holder with both of these projects?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we can call on you for some support if needed, but we'll take the lead.
Yep.
Okay, is the group okay with that? The ones that are left? Yeah, I knew I'd see a bunch of thumbs
That's
up.
my preference.
Everybody's doing this is what we're all doing.
We are gonna draw straws next time for who's the fiscal agent for this grant, because I don't have to draw because we're already.
We all have to agree to the game.
Okay, well, we'll work on this.
How do you step backwards in Zoom?
Yeah, the like,
Yeah, hang up. Okay,
okay, I think in the interest of time, we've already identified several things for future meetings. Is there any last thing that anybody wants to yell out to add to the planning or steering committee agendas for the next meetings?
well, just for me, Angie, we've got a lot coming for a planning team meeting. So planning team members, please plan on attending November 10th. And we need to make sure Bowser's there too if we can. So hopefully
Okay.
Melissa or Barb can attend.
Yeah, I might, just to the planning team, I might like just send you all a coordination email after this meeting to make sure that I have everything on the list. Because there was a lot and I could have missed things.
And Angie, you'll send me the documentation I need for my board. For these two that we approved today.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Yep. I wasn't sure what you're talking about, but yes, I will give you that. The eyes, the list of the eyes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, everyone.